Korea late today launching.
As the world reacts to each of its provocations, North Korea secretly carries on with its plans. Generation after generation. Piece by piece. It relentlessly assembles the machinery that will finally place it in the center of the game. To force America to treat it as an equal, president after president.
I, Donald John Trump, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
This is the story of a little dictatorship, a mythical relic of the Cold War that has managed to gain the respect of the most powerful country in the world, its archenemy.
This is a leader who really is an unknown personality. People don't know much about him. I think that he's going to surprise on the upside, but I've said it many times. Who knows? You know, the way they say that you know if you're going to like somebody in the first 5 seconds? You ever hear that one? Well, I think that very quickly I'll know whether or not something good is going to happen.
After months of insults and military threats, Donald Trump accepted Kim Jong-un's invitation. The summit took place in Singapore. The meeting lasted only a few hours, a meeting to avoid war.
Would you like to say something to the president?
Today, we are attending an historic meeting. We are signing a treaty that is to bury our difficult past and that heralds a new departure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay.
For almost 70 years, the Kim dynasty has been getting ready for this showdown. Its nuclear program, its military provocations, all had a single objective:
Thank you very much. It's fantastic.
to finally be treated as an equal by the United States. Kim Jong-un is a small leader of a small country. Opposing him is the President of the United States, the President of the first world power. Under the spotlights of the entire world, the most powerful man on earth is threatening this little dictator and setting a strange game of words in motion. This should be an easy victory for Donald Trump, but in fact it isn't.
I didn't fall down. As you went through each generation of Kims and each iteration of U.S.-North Korea relations, I think the North Koreans became increasingly convinced that nuclear weapons were their insurance policy or their salvation. And certainly they became convinced of that when they saw what happened to Iraq, when they saw what happened to Libya. The one thing that those two dictators in those countries did wrong was not having nuclear weapons, and that the only thing that the United States respects is a country with nuclear weapons. The United States has never attacked a country with nuclear weapons.
On the 38th parallel, the demilitarized zone is sealed tight. This incredible border divides the two Koreas. The armies of North and South Korea have been in a deadlock since 1953, since the end of the Korean War. This confrontation seems to be fixed for eternity. But the silent balance tipped when North Korea conducted its first nuclear test in 2006. Pyongyang has never hidden its progress in developing the bomb. The regime gives massive publicity to each new explosion, In 2016, it proudly announced that it was henceforth on an equal footing with the great nuclear powers.
With this nuclear test, we have conclusively verified the structural and functional characteristics, the capacity and power of standardized, normalized nuclear warheads. They can now equip strategic ballistic missile forces of the People's Army of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. These smaller nuclear warheads have a larger striking power. We can now produce as many as we want and as many as we need.
In my opinion, this fifth test unmistakably makes their nuclear capacity not only credible, but very dangerous. Of course, the third and the fourth tests were already worrisome. We must also remember that in the 1990s, North Korea carried out many high-intensity explosions in their laboratories. This was in order to miniaturize their warheads, allowing them to strike targets at longer distances.
Along with the progress on its bomb, North Korea was also developing increasingly more effective missiles. Since 2017, their striking range exceeds 10,000 kilometers.
We begin with North Korea late today launching a new missile.
North Korea has announced it successfully tested a nuclear-capable intercontinental ballistic missile.
Kim Jong-un says this is a miniaturized nuclear warhead, a capability the world hoped North Korea would never reach.
North Korea's new missile test is another intercontinental ballistic missile. It flew higher and longer than ever before.
A triumphant North Korea says its latest ballistic missile test demonstrates that it now has the capability to strike anywhere in the United States.
The world is in a state of shock, but North Korea's entry into the nuclear club is not a surprise. It's the result of decades of work, a program, an obsession, born even before the foundation of the People's Republic of Korea itself.
During World War II, many Koreans were taken to Japan as slave laborers. So when the nuclear weapons went off in Japan during World War II at the end, many Koreans had seen those weapons, seen the effects, knew about it. They went home to Korea after the war and described it to the Koreans, and the leadership picked up on the fact that this was a really big deal.
After the Second World War, the victorious Allies divided Korea on the German model along the 38th parallel. In the north, the Soviets installed communist militant Kim Il-sung at the head of the Provisional People's Committee. 3 years later, he definitively took over the reins and founded the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. In 1950, Kim Il-sung attacked South Korea. This was the beginning of the Korean War, which resulted in 3 million deaths over 3 years. The North was supported by China and the Soviet Union. The South was supported by an international coalition, the first of its kind, under the aegis of the UN. The conflict was so intense that MacArthur, the American general in command of the UN forces, wanted to use nuclear weapons. For the new Korean dictator, this was a revelation. If his small country was to survive, it needed to have nuclear weapons.
Once the Korean War was ongoing, Kim Il-sung went to the Russians and said, gee, I'd like to kind of get into the position where I had nuclear weapons and could deter the outside. And the Russians said, not on your life. They were very resistant, and he kept going back again and again. Eventually, they allowed some North Korean scientists to go and learn to become nuclear engineers.
When North Korea started its nuclear program, it was initially the choice of the weakest. The weakest don't have enough resources and therefore can't be strong in all military fields. So they have to concentrate all their means on a single thing, the most important thing. In North Korea's case, this was the development of a nuclear arsenal.
After the Korean War, Kim Il-sung hoped that Mao, who had just lost a son in the conflict, would help Korea develop its nuclear arsenal. He went to Peking, but relations between the two leaders were strained. The Chinese dictator did not trust his Korean counterpart. Sharing top secrets about the Chinese bomb with him was totally out of the question. So, at the beginning of the 60s, Kim Il-sung turned once again to Moscow. The Soviet Union, who wanted to restrict Mao's influence, offered Pyongyang a treaty of friendship that would bind the two countries for decades. And the Soviet Union's first gift was a turnkey nuclear reactor.
Right from the start, Kim Il-sung had the intention of becoming a nuclear power. That's why Korea acquired Russian technology, IRT-2000 reactors. For Kim Il-sung, this was foresight. He knew that he would ultimately have to confront the South Korea-America alliance. And he knew it would be very difficult with conventional weapons. So, he decided that developing a nuclear arsenal was a priority.
During the 1970s, American spy planes took the first photographs of the small 5-megawatt reactor that the Soviets had given North Korea. Operational since 1965, it was constructed at Yongbyon, about 100 kilometers north of Pyongyang. That's when the main North Korean nuclear program started to develop. But it wasn't until the 1980s that the CIA began to worry about the progress of the nuclear facilities. No one had yet really understood the danger they represented.
When I was in the intelligence community working at CIA, we called North Korea the hardest of the hard targets. I used to work the Soviet Union, and in retrospect, that was an open book compared to North Korea. So you gather tidbits of information, you put them together. It's like assembling a jigsaw puzzle with far too few pieces, and yet you have to come up with what's the answer on the cover of the box.
We watched the North Koreans build a small, it's called a gas graphite moderated nuclear reactor, 5 megawatt. It's a research reactor, it's a small reactor, but it produces each year in its fuel about 5 kilograms or so of plutonium, enough material for a single nuclear weapon each year.
By the early 1980s, North Korea already had all the ingredients to manufacture nuclear weapons, to the apparent indifference of the international community. While continuing its secret advance, Pyongyang signed the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons in 1985. But at the end of the 80s, the Berlin Wall fell. And with it the entire Soviet world, including North Korea, which was communism's exotic showcase. At the time, its economy seemed to be more prosperous than South Korea's, which was still in its infancy. But with the fall of his international communist allies, Kim Il-sung knew that he no longer had any choice. He had to bring his country out of isolation.
In 1992, they came to the United States, and the United States said, you must reconcile yourself with your commitments to the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna, an agreement you made pursuant to your adherence to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which you adhered to because the Soviets insisted before giving you any nuclear assistance that you do so. So this is the root of the problem. They have joined the NPT, they accept safeguards, and in the course of accepting safeguards, they ultimately accept inspections, and the inspections turn up an inconsistency in their declaration.
In May 1992, Hans Blix, the Director General of the IAEA, went in person to Yongbyon. This was the beginning of a strange game between the North Koreans and the agency's inspectors. 2 years of bluffing, 2 years of tensions, of threats, and of subterfuge. On some days, Pyongyang would give access to the still unknown installations. On others, it threatened to expel the inspectors. In the end, Hans Blix could only recognize his failure. He was none the wiser about the North Korean nuclear program.
Full inspection was not accepted at the radiochemical laboratory in accordance with the agreement we had. As a result, we cannot exclude that this radiochemical plant, reprocessing plant, has been operated between February last year and this year. We are not saying that it has been, but we cannot exclude that it has been operated.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President-elect William Jefferson Clinton.
Meanwhile, in early 1993, a new president was taking the oath of office in Washington.
Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
During the first months of his presidency, Bill Clinton acknowledged that America had not seen this threat coming.
Good afternoon. Before I became president, they may have accumulated enough nuclear material to make a nuclear device or two. That has been the press reports. I fail to see how that shows a lack of resolve on our part since we have been here. I think we have pursued this course quite firmly. Thank you very much.
The new president's first trip abroad took him to the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. While walking on the so-called Bridge of No Return, Bill Clinton felt free to provoke the armed North Korean soldiers on the opposite side. The message was clear.
It's pointless for them to try to develop nuclear weapons because if they ever use them, it will be the end of the country.
Bill Clinton promised the total destruction of North Korea if it pursued its nuclear program. A quarter of a century before Donald Trump repeated the same threat. But the threats in 1994 were more than simple tweets.
We believed that was a place to stop them before they made the 6 nuclear bombs. And so as Secretary of Defense at the time, I made a public statement that we would not permit North Korea to reprocess that fuel to make the nuclear bombs. We were prepared to take some form of military action to keep that from happening. At that time, North Korean press referred to me as a war maniac.
Despite the threat, North Korea continued producing plutonium at its Yongbyon facility and withdrew completely from the Treaty of Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. This was the 13th of June, 1994. In Washington, war seemed only a few hours away.
And one of the things that was being looked at that point was the possibility of striking North Korea's reactor. We knew where it was, we knew where the facilities were. And so that was looked at very seriously. Other things that were looked at were even broader military options. At one point, the American ambassador in Seoul said, well, if you're going to be looking at these options, I would have to tell American citizens that it's time to think about leaving.
On the 16th of June, Secretary of Defense William Perry explained the plans of attack to the president in the White House Situation Room.
I told him that there would be many casualties in South Korea as well as in American troops. they had almost 1 million men massed on the border, and those 1 million men were very close to Seoul. Seoul, the greater area of Seoul has a population of 20 million people, all of them within about a 1 or 2 hours drive of the border. And so it would be a disaster. But I also told them that we would defeat North Korea. It would take maybe a few months to do that, but we would defeat them. Between the South Korean Army and the American air and naval support, we had far superior forces. That was one aspect of what I told them. I also told them that if they got nuclear weapons, it would be much, much more dangerous. We should take every action we could to deter North Korea from going ahead to build nuclear weapons.
On the same day, Jimmy Carter crossed the demilitarized zone surrounded by North Korean soldiers. The Clinton administration was resolved on war, but the former president was, on his own initiative, trying a last-chance negotiation. In Pyongyang, he was received by Kim Il-sung, who was ill but assisted by his son, Kim Jong-il.
Literally, as the White House was having meetings talking about these options and what to do, Jimmy Carter met with Kim Il-sung, and Kim Il-sung suggested that there was a conversation to be had, a negotiation to be had about North Korea's future and future relations with the United States. And as they say in diplomacy, someone blinked. And the rest was history.
A miracle of history. Confrontation had been narrowly avoided. A few days later, North Korea was plunged into tragedy. Kim Il-sung had just died. The great leader became the eternal president. Kim Jong-il, who'd been number 2 in the regime for many years, now replaced his father. After mourning, he resumed negotiations with Washington. These were held in Geneva. Robert Gallucci was head of the American delegation. After 4 months of negotiations, an agreement was reached. To this day, it's the last one ever signed by the North Koreans. Pyongyang agreed to stop its military program, and the Americans promised to supply North Korea 2 light water reactors. These could produce energy, but not bombs.
The negotiating objective in 1994 was to stop a plutonium production nuclear weapons program in North Korea. When we concluded the deal, we did exactly that. They had 3 reactors, 1 operating, 2 under construction to produce plutonium, and 1 reprocessing plant to extract the plutonium. We shut all of them down. All of them. The Central Intelligence Agency projected that the North Koreans would have roughly about 200 kilograms of plutonium each year if we didn't do the deal.
The Clinton administration kept the talks going up until the end of the president's mandate. Madeleine Albright, Secretary of State, went to Pyongyang in order to prepare for Clinton's meeting in North Korea with Kim Jong-il, now number 1 of the regime. Meanwhile, William Perry continued negotiating the follow-up of the Geneva Agreements, an advance that was to be historic.
President Clinton agreed the terms of the agreement and said that he was happy to meet with Kim Jong-un to sign the agreement. But a funny thing happened that month. It's called a U.S. election. A new administration came in. President Clinton was reluctant to sign an agreement that constrained the new president. He said the new president should sign the agreement.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President-elect of the United States, George Walker Bush.
I, George Walker.
With this new president came a radical shift.
George Walker Bush do solemnly swear. Preserve, protect, and defend.
At the beginning of his presidency, he interrupted negotiations with North Korea.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
From the very start, Bush quickly took control of the administration. So, Perry's plans could no longer be implemented. They were totally abandoned by the new administration that was being put in place. For Bush, it was anything but Clinton. Perry's work became null and void. All the work achieved by the Clinton administration was wiped out. And here, in Korea, relations between the North and the South were also very unstable.
In 2001, the international situation changed suddenly. And America radically redefined its foreign policy.
North Korea is a regime arming with missiles and weapons of mass destruction while starving its citizens. States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world.
This, we have been told since, was taken very badly in Pyongyang. And it was one of the reasons why they no longer had faith that the United States had any intent of normalizing relations, something that was for them an important reason for giving up their plutonium-based nuclear weapons program.
Okay. How's that? That was the fatal flaw of the Bush administration. They didn't like the agreed framework. Okay, you know, they were elected, that's fine. But have something ready to replace it with. Instead, they left this enormous vacuum, and the North Koreans just started up their program and never stopped it since then. So our last best chance, our last window, October, November 2000, and then it all disappeared.
During the Bush years, North Korean propaganda violently raged against America. It was no longer afraid to threaten the United States, even in English.
Government statement of the DPRK. Since its advent, the Bush administration has designated us as part of an axis of evil. It proclaimed it as its state policy to deny our system and designated our country as a target of preemptive nuclear attack, which means an open declaration of a nuclear war against our country.
The regime concentrated all its efforts on the Yongbyon facility, where thousands of scientists now lived and worked. The North Koreans no longer concealed the fact that they were preparing a bomb. Countdown was inevitable. It was completed on the 9th of October 2006 with a triumphant announcement on the official state television stations.
The DPRK was compelled to substantially prove its possession of nuclear weapons to protect its sovereignty and right to existence from the daily increasing danger of war from the U.S.
Their first test was very small, but it proved that the Kim dynasty had never cancelled the North Korean nuclear program. They had yielded neither to Bush's threats nor to Bill Clinton's promises.
In 1994, North Korea had neither a functional nuclear bomb nor intercontinental ballistic missiles. The country was very weak. If there had ever been a war, North Korea would have been completely destroyed. It was for this reason that the North Koreans promised the Americans that they would not develop nuclear weapons. They needed time in order to develop their program. Today, it is clear that North Korea had never stopped lying to the Americans and the international community. The world has been duped by North Korea. An authoritarian and even totalitarian political regime such as North Korea has two advantages: the rapidity of decisions and the longevity of strategies. The fact that strategies endure is a definite asset. In democratic countries such as the United States or Japan, measures change radically according to the government in power, even if the objective remains the same. But these governments, be it the United States or Japan, are all fundamentally against the development of nuclear weapons by North Korea.
Faithfully, the Office of President of the United States.
The Office of President of the United States, faithfully.
And will, to the best of my ability.
The Kim dynasty, while holding its course, thus saw a succession of American presidents. Time always works to the advantage of dictators.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Then it was Barack Obama's turn to occupy the White House. He attempted to renew the talks from the Clinton years.
At the outset of the Obama administration, the president and his staff, myself included, sought to send messages to North Korea to signal that we were interested in pursuing or reinventing a diplomatic track.
So you sent this message. What was the answer?
The answer was a missile test. In the first few months of the Obama administration, it was an offensive gesture, it was an act of defiance, and it was also a test. The North Koreans have a history of trying to break in a new leader, either in South Korea or in the United States, seeking to prove, you're not the boss of me, we will defy your expectations, we can't be bought, we can't be intimidated.
American satellites and spy planes confirmed that North Korea was no longer actually afraid of Washington. The Yongbyon facility was now gigantic. Barack Obama was aware of this, but he preferred not to react. He saw no political advantage in attacking North Korea. Consequently, his administration invented a concept in order to justify their inaction: strategic patience.
You know, the North Koreans used to say to us, your policy is strategic patience. That's good. Be as patient as you want, they said. We'll just build up a nuclear program. And that's what they did, unfortunately.
Secretly, not all relations were severed. In this building near the United Nations in New York, Robert Carlin regularly met with North Korean diplomats during the Obama years. These unofficial talks behind these windows occurred while the North Koreans did everything possible to attract the attention of America. During Obama's 2 terms in office, they conducted 4 nuclear tests and launched 12 ballistic missiles.
Each time essentially saying to the Americans, look, we're serious, this is what we've got. Do you want to sit down and talk? No? Okay, we'll go to the next step. They finally showed us their enrichment program. In November 2010, Sig Hecker, Professor John Lewis, and me, they took us to Yongbyon. They walked us into this facility, which we were not really expecting. We thought maybe we would see a few centrifuges, maybe. I don't know how many, 10, 100, whatever, just small number. And we would say, oh yeah, that's really impressive, you know. Instead, they took us into this building, took us up to the viewing window, and there are 2,000 centrifuges. They let us, you know, our jaws dropped. We were sort of speechless as we tried to count the centrifuges. And then they whisked us out of there because they didn't want us to see that, the whole thing too much. Point was, somebody wanted us to know that they had done that, and that the situation had become more complicated and more dangerous.
Kim Jong-il's dream was to receive an American president on an equal standing. To be recognized by the United States of America was the only political objective of his regime. This was never achieved. He died on the 17th of December 2011. His son, Kim Jong-un, succeeded him. This latest avatar of the Kim dynasty is very different from his two predecessors. Kim Jong-il had been trained for 20 years to assume power. As number 2 of the regime, he understood the international negotiations and had a large following in the army. But Kim Jong-un appeared as an inexperienced young man at the beginning of his reign, and many thought that he would not be able to retain his authority. However, he rapidly asserted himself, first by eliminating everyone who might cast a shadow over him, even if they were members of his inner circle. He executed his uncle, who was shot for corruption. His half-brother was poisoned at Kuala Lumpur airport by the North Korean Secret Service. As head of the country, he rapidly developed 2 priorities. The first was the improvement of the country's economic situation. The second was the concurrent development of nuclear weapons. This had become an obsession.
Our nuclear force is a guarantee for protecting our national sovereignty. With it, we shall build peace, prosperity, and power, as well as the happiness of the people.
He seems firmly in control. He seems to have intimidated everybody that he needs to intimidate. He seems to have inspired everybody he needs to inspire. He gives the regime a panache of modernity in terms of how he appears in public with his wife and visits the perfume factory and things like that. He knows how to appeal to the elites and to keep their loyalty, despite all of the difficulties. And I think he's done just enough to ensure that there will be continued stability.
The young Kim Jong-un realized that nuclear tests were not enough to impress America. He also had to prove that he was capable of striking his enemy directly. So he conducted ballistic tests at a rate never seen before. Broadcast on official television, he often supervised them in person.
We tried the good cop approach, we tried the bad cop approach, we tried ignoring North Korea, we tried threatening military, everything you can possibly imagine, almost everything, was tried during this period, and nothing worked. Nothing worked more than temporarily. And because the North Korea problem was not as high a priority as, let's say, the war on terrorism, the situation in Afghanistan, Iraq, etc., the problem did not get the resources and the attention that it needed and that it deserved.
The Obama administration thought that it had time to spare, that North Korea could not possibly acquire the nuclear proficiency needed to be able to directly threaten the United States during his term of office. But Kim Jong-un took the world by surprise. He made the country's atomic scientists international heroes. They were welcomed by cheering crowds in Pyongyang. He organized great celebrations for them with the best performers in North Korea. And despite the sanctions, he annually spent more than 20% of the GDP on the nuclear program. And so, during the last days of Obama's presidency, the Kim's trap began to close.
And the Unacceptable Act was announced in January of 2017 by Kim Jong-un, and it was his intent to proceed with the development of an intercontinental ballistic missile that could reach the United States, and mating that missile to one of their nuclear weapons so that they could threaten the United States, as they would say, the United States threatens them.
January 2017. The date was not chosen by chance.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Donald
A few days later, Washington invested a new president.
Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution.
As for all the other presidents, Pyongyang did everything within its power to attract international attention and to reappear as the major crisis. This time, Kim Jong-un had a good chance of reaching his goal.
Well, I recall when in November of 2016, following the election, President Obama invited President-elect Trump to the Oval Office, and they had an extended conversation. He described telling Trump that North Korea was likely to become the most urgent security challenge of his presidency.
The new element is Trump. I've seen many American presidents. Among them, some are tolerant and some are intolerant. But there never was a president who said that he was going to solve the North Korean problem by destroying North Korea. Until now, that was never considered a valid option.
Mr. Secretary General, Mr. President, world leaders, and distinguished delegates, welcome to New York. It is a profound honor to stand here in my home city as a representative of the American people. Now, North Korea's reckless pursuit of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles threatens the entire world. The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime.
September 2017. The General Assembly is stunned by the new US president's speech. The response will be scathing.
The United States will never be able to provoke war against myself or our country. The whole of America is now within reach of our nuclear weapons. The nuclear button is still on my desk. This is no threat, simply a fact. I hope the United States keeps this in mind.
A low-scale military attack against North Korea has the possibility of escalating into a nuclear option. That's the difference between today and 1994. We were prepared to take more drastic actions in '94 than we are prepared today. And in short, nuclear weapons do work as a deterrent. They work for the United States as a deterrent. They also work for North Korea as a deterrent, and that's exactly what the North Korean leadership knows, and that's exactly why they built their nuclear arsenal, to deter the United States from taking military action against them. There is, in my judgment, no military option against North Korea today.
Despite the war of words in which he was embroiled with Kim Jong-un, Donald Trump is probably aware that a nuclear conflict with North Korea is no longer possible. So to make him submit, he has the UN vote the most drastic economic sanctions ever.
The draft resolution received 15 votes in favor. The draft resolution has been adopted unanimously as Resolution 2397.
It was the 20th time since 1993 that the Security Council decided to impose stricter sanctions against North Korea. The sanctions have been enforced for 9 or 10 years now, but you can see that they're a failure. Some people still think that they will work one day. Well, that's self-persuasion, not strategy. I almost never agree with President Putin, except on one occasion when he said that the North Koreans will never abandon their nuclear weapons, even if they have to survive by eating roots. That will never change. It's impossible to subdue North Korea by imposing economic sanctions.
The sanctions have always been too superficial to really hurt North Korea, and these sanctions are the origin of the Yangmadang, the North Korean black market. The state distribution system was in ruins, and when the sanctions condemned it, a parallel economy took its place, and Kim Jong-un allowed it to grow. So one of the consequences of the economic sanctions was that the North Korean economy actually improved.
This parallel economy is supplied mainly from China. Dandong, a Chinese town on the border, has never really cut ties with Korea on the other side of the river. Despite the UN resolutions, Beijing has never taken any real measures to stop this trade. It remains an open secret. Even if officially it applied international sanctions at the beginning of Kim Jong-un's reign. The North Korean dictator knows the importance of this Chinese influx. So before negotiating with Donald Trump, he went in person to see Xi Jinping, his Chinese counterpart.
Kim Jong-un went to meet the Chinese president 3 times in the space of a few weeks, and he had never met him before. What was the outcome of these meetings? Beijing once again authorized Chinese tourists to visit North Korea, and he re-established air connections. Trade resumed along the border. In short, sanctions were gradually weakening. China wants North Korea to remain in existence as it is, even if it has nuclear weapons.
What is the most important conflict in the world today? That between China and the United States. They're in opposition on both diplomatic and security levels. As long as this conflict defines international relations, China will have a strategic interest in supporting North Korea, exactly as the United States has obvious strategic interests in supporting South Korea. So, can you actually imagine that China would exert any real economic pressure and even risk the collapse of the North Korean regime just to please the United States? No, that's impossible. Kim Jong-un was not happy with merely moving closer to Beijing. With Seoul also, tensions were mounting as never before in the history of the Korean peninsula. The North Korean leader met South Korean President Moon Jae-in several times. Their first summit proved an historic occasion. It was Kim Jong-un's first public appearance in front of the international media. From the very first moment, he did everything he possibly could to improve his image, symbolically inviting the South Korean president to cross the demarcation line between the two countries on foot. In just a few hours, Kim Jong-un successfully turned public opinion in South Korea, where he already had an excellent image. Seoul television was totally under his spell.
North Korea is going ahead with its plan, as it has already announced. Firstly, they say we're developing a nuclear arsenal, and then we will focus on economic development. This is why, from now on, Pyongyang has become peaceful, open to dialogue. Today, it is in their interest to meet around the bargaining table, and in so doing, they can rid themselves of the consequences of international sanctions. All they need to do is convince China, convince Russia, convince South Korea to reduce American pressure. This will win them time. The idea behind this behavior is to pretend they're giving up their nuclear weapons. As in the past, they're calculating their next move. They know that President Moon in Seoul has only 3 years left in office, and that President Trump in Washington won't last much longer. So by intelligently managing the next few years, North Korea can become a nuclear power forever.
At the Singapore summit, despite his cheerful countenance, Kim Jong-un did not sign any concrete agreement.
President, how's it going so far, sir? Very good. What do you think? Very, very good. Excellent relationship. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, in spite of the American president's optimism, this meeting is looking more and more like a trap.
Mr. Kim, will you give up your nuclear weapons, sir?
I'd say that North Korea had its own plan, its own agenda, and that the United States tried to disrupt it. They were forced to react, so in this sense, yes, we can call it a trap. But this situation is complex, involving a lot of countries. Not everything is in the hands of Kim Jong-un. The trap isn't just theirs. On the other hand, it must be said that the United States underestimated North Korea for too long, and that obviously aggravated the situation on the Korean peninsula.
On the border between the two Koreas, there's a symbol of these decades of diplomatic meandering. It's a train line built after the North-South Summit in the year 2000. It links Pyongyang to Seoul, but no train has ever been able to use it. At the edge of the demilitarized zone that separates the two Koreas, this train line has become a tourist spot that South Koreans come to visit. Thanks to dialogue between the two countries, some hope they will one day be able to buy a ticket to the north.
This time, with the North-South Summit, I really feel the situation is improving. Maybe in the near future, the two Koreas will be reunited. I so hope to be able to go there.
We're the same people, the same country. If there's the slightest chance for me to go, I'll certainly take that train with all my children. At the moment, things are still in the dialogue stage. We're hoping for a peaceful outcome. But in my opinion, this cycle of détente can't last. Washington is going to gently insist through the diplomatic channels, but they'll end up tiring of that, knowing that Korea has no intention of giving up its nuclear arsenal. I think Trump's going to quickly change his attitude. He'll toughen up on sanctions and put an end to dialogue. Then things will escalate with, why not, targeted strikes on nuclear sites. The worst is always possible.